All right. Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Coach's Corner. Today, we're going to be talking about execution versus mentality and kind of the pros and cons of each one, especially in application. So more so in tournament and how important it is and pretty much when you see it, especially in top level play. So really excited to get into this topic. If you guys enjoy the content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you guys are watching on any kind of podcast on any kind of podcast platform like Spotify, make sure to rate the podcast. And yeah, we'll get right into it. So this is a tough topic because obviously you need both, right? Especially at top level, you for sure need both. I think in terms of execution, let's talk about execution first because I think the mental side of the game is the one that takes longer to discuss. So I think we can just talk about execution. It's a little bit more black and white. And execution pretty much is going to be executing whatever you want to do, you did it. So even top players, they don't have 100% execution rate. So, I mean, maybe there's like a game where a player has 100% execution rate or something like that, but it's very rare, especially when you're trying to push your limits in terms of like how fast you play and even how technical your character is. Do you land every single confirm? Do you land every single bread and butter? And then there's some things that have, I guess, like training wheels to your execution. Or if you mess up, it's a frame trap or something like that, right? Where it's like, oh, I missed the timing on it a little bit too far. And sometimes you can even get rewarded for it, where it's like, oh, I messed up the timing and I didn't get the true combo, but they mashed jump. So I still hit them anyway and they don't have jump. Or, they air dodge and I frame trap and something like that. The only time execution for combos is really, really tight and it super matters is against frame one outs, or if you had something true and you went for it, because a lot of frame one outs will reversal you, snake grenade, Pokemon's trainer switch, Luigi down B, stuff like that. So, really important stuff. I think, in my opinion, the most important execution is either going to be in your neutral or kill confirms. So kill confirms are combos that will lead into a KO. So those two things are really, really important. I do think your low percent bread and butters obviously is also important, but I would put that on the later part of the list just because if even if you can get the damage and all that stuff, if you can't execute in neutral, then when are you going to get the openings, right? And the higher you go up in bracket, those openings become few and far apart. So, yeah, Bam, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I guess maybe some type of priority list, or if you have any specific thoughts on execution itself.
Yeah, man. I think execution is something that I think that even on like top players, right? You always got to think about because, like you said, you're not no one's going to be perfect, right? Also, that being said, I do think that over time, I feel that there's people don't understand just the same as process and getting better in the game and like just general practice on things like there's ways to go about learning how to perform better and get like greater execution, right? It's like it's very trained, and sometimes some people think like, oh, some people are just kind of born with that talent and whatever it may be, but like there's definitely a process, right? Even simple things when you're like looking at combos and like how do I if I can't get the whole combo at once, then I'm breaking down the combos in pieces, digestible pieces that I can get in time, and then once I can actually build that there, then I can move on to the next step and link them together, so to speak, right? um but execution is a big thing. It's obviously extremely important. Like the more execution you have, obviously the more you can do with your character, the more conversions you can get, more setups you can get, etc. Right? Even something that you were just talking about there where you're like, oh, if you like mess up, then you can be a situation where they can jump. But even those kind of things, right, you can kind of practice down in terms of timing that you can you actually do set that up, like it's an intentional setup versus like a quote unquote mistake, right? um and so, like, yeah, I mean, execution to me has always been hype. I think as a person, I tend to have like solid execution. I think for the amount of that I practice, but mainly because of like I used to play piano when I was younger. But like those little things go a long way, man. Just to like you get more options, right? Like why would you not be ever looking like not looking to improve your execution, right? And so, but yeah, I think there's ways to learn, and I think when people talk about execution in that holistic space, I think a lot of times it's like people tend to have problems with it because they don't know how to learn accordingly. So that's the thing that's really interesting to me when it comes to execution.
Yeah. Um, so I want to pull it back to the original premise real quick, like the idea of like the balance of like mental game and execution. Um, because I think the thing that's interesting about the topic to me is that there's a balance in Smash in terms of execution and mental game that is pretty hard to find in other places, especially more like, let's say, non-game areas. Think about something like traditional sports, often very like execution focused, very athletic. And thinking about like strategy games, like competitive strategy games, like something like chess, it is almost entirely like your game plans, your mental performance. And so the balance here is very rare. And even in something like traditional fighters like Street Fighter, yeah, there's a huge element of execution, but it's mostly contained to like your combos, right? Your conversions. And in neutral, you're mostly just like, you're mostly doing like your specials, which aren't that much of an execution check, and like your pokes and your movements. There are of course fighting games in which neutral has way more execution to it, like think about like a Marvel, etc. But the balance of Smash especially is just it's pretty unique. And so what I think is interesting is that like what we see is that even at like high level, people kind of like tend to specialize to some degree. And you see like some top level players that are very much like they're very much like strategy, game plan. Think about like a Tweak or a Buzz. And then there's players who are very much like execution heavy, right? Like intuitive, like a Spargo or a Light. And that doesn't mean like the Buzz and Tweak don't have execution. And it doesn't mean that Spargo and Light don't have a game plan. It's just that I think it also kind of shows that like we're not super developed as an esport yet, because it's possible to get away with specializing in one or the other and to do things that are kind of like objectively incorrect, but you make it work because your game plan is better, because they don't know about it, or because your execution is so much better and your opponent cannot stop you. And so something that we see a lot from Light, for example, is him landing at a disadvantage and just like running up and up smashing his opponents, or like rising nairing his opponents, and like stuff like that honestly really should not work. And the reason it works is because people don't see it coming. Like they just don't. Well, first of all, they don't have the knowledge, right? Like the mental game, the game plan developed to be ready for it. And second of all, their execution is sloppy enough for a Fox to be able to A land out of their pressure and run up and up smash you, which is like all things considered pretty fast, but in the context of Smash, it's pretty slow, right? Like they're in disadvantage, you're chasing them. They shouldn't have like what 15 to 20 frames of leeway to A land and dash up smash you. And so I think what's interesting is that if you look at like the top level right now, there's a huge emphasis on execution. Again, like Spargo Light, two of the best players in the world. Think about someone like Sonics, and I think Sonics is honestly probably the best balance of the two in top level Smash right now. But even if you look at Sonics, I think a lot of what gets him his wins is that his execution is just so extremely clean. If you think about Akula, I don't think Akula's game plans are that complex, but I think his execution is just extremely clean, all things considered. He doesn't go for super complexity things that require like intense execution, but he also, at least based on my research, and I could be missing some of the high level Steves, but his conversion rate off of like stray, for example, like stray jabs into a tangible advantage is higher than all of the other Steves that I've watched. Mia as well, just a player that thrives a lot off of just executing perfectly on his advantage states. And so I think what's really interesting is that for Smash Ultimate, because the game has so many, well, let's put it this way, because the game has shifted a lot more focus to movement compared to Smash 4, that also allows for more mastery over execution, because well, you're almost constantly moving, right? And so if there is more movement happening, if there are more movement tools, if there is more nuance in movement, now maybe not nuance because perfect fifting is gone, but things like dashes are more flexible, right, in this game, and jumps are stronger, so you spend more time drifting, and drifting is a very nuanced thing. Because there's so much focus on movement, you get more mileage out of just having good execution, period, than in Smash 4, which was a little bit more rigid. And so I think what is interesting in this game is that while it is possible to follow both examples, what we kind of see is that most players just push the execution extremely far to the point where they have to start building game plans. And the nice thing is, when you're at that point, you are already playing against such good players that you get to develop a steady and like a solid and foolproof game plan from the get-go. Whereas if you start off developing a game plan, you probably have to revise it like over and over and over as you get like through the ranks and people get better at like the knowledge checks and dealing with your character. Whereas if you get to like that high level first and then you build a game plan, you're gonna have a game plan that is gonna be like resistant to top level players from the get-go. And that's something that, for example, you see a lot in Melee as well, where there are some people who get to like really high level without much of like the mental game on deck, at least in terms of like developing game plans, etc. And then you have to face like a mango, and suddenly, okay, you have to have a plan, right? Even though your punish game, it's already there, your movement is already there, it's just not coming together yet at the level that you need to be these top level players. Okay, well, let's put it together in a good way. And we see a very similar thing, I think, in Ultimate. And I think that's interesting, because I don't think, if you look at like Brawl and Smash 4, I think Brawl and Smash 4 were games in which you had to have a plan. You could not rely on just out executing your opponent in Brawl and Smash 4, at least in my opinion. Well, I mean, arguably Bayo changed a little bit of that. Late game Smash 4 changed a little bit of that. But generally, this is a new thing to like the post-Brawl generation now that we're in Ultimate. And so I think there's a little bit of a different dynamic there. And I think that's interesting. And it's something that we're seeing more and more also now that Steve is becoming a better character, who's also a character that just thrives a lot off of execution, because he can stick to very simple plans built around the character strengths. And from there, the players can just focus on just executing that to as essentially the cleanest degree possible. So that's my take on the premise. I think it's a very interesting discussion. And so I'll pass it to you, Tony. Tell me what your thoughts are, Tony.
Well, my current thought is, as soon as you said that, was that I'm remembering the clip of Melee Jigglypuff walking toward Melee Sheik while Melee Sheik keeps throwing needles and trying to zone out Jigglypuff, while Jigglypuff just keeps walking forward and just eventually just reaches Sheik in the corner, crouch cancels something, and just rests her to death. And it's
that's great. I love that.
Yeah, execution, mental game, it's all up there. So mental game and execution are not exclusive of each other, and generally having one skill or one developed talent, however you want to look at it, enables you to improve at the other. If you want to put more thought into the game, if your execution is down so pat that you don't actually have to use any of your subconscious thoughts to go ahead and make execution, then all of a sudden you have so much more brain power available, because your mental stack itself is so clean and empty. So that gives you...
AKA autopilot, right? Like refining your autopilot.
Yes. Well, most players can't put complex or powerful game plans to begin with into their autopilot, because generally the process for acquiring a valuable autopilot that I don't think players tend to realize, especially when they're coming from a beginner level, is that the reason you have things like the beginner, intermediate, and advanced meme, where the advanced and beginner always say the same things. Yes, the bell curve. The reason that happens is because generally a beginner is going to have simple thoughts, but that may or may not be correct. If
wait, Tony, could you repeat the sentence? I like lagged out. So just start this sentence. Yeah.
So the reason beginners are going to have simple thoughts similar to advanced players is if those thoughts are incorrect, which most likely they're going to be, then they're beginners. If they are actually correct and making very simple assumptions that are correct through what's usually coincidence or just pattern recognition, that's generally what we call talent, or just a prodigy, is generally the players who just make simple assumptions and start out that way. But as they grow, either way, and we see this a lot with prodigies who actually start out plateau for a long period of time and stagnate, and then eventually they'll just start improving again. And what that is when you do reach the intermediate stage, is you need to unpack why your beliefs are what they are, evaluate if you could maybe min-max those beliefs to be better, your plans to be better, optimize them. And then the process from there is that you need to begin optimizing again and put them back so that they become simple statements. Like you don't want full quadratic equations on why you're going to press the A button. You just need to have, I press the A button because it makes them hit. And then the reason that that hit is the correct hit is because you have previously gone through there. And that's generally where having a coach as a game mentor comes into play, because a more experienced player who is going to have a greater unpacked and explicit understanding of why things happen will then be able to help lead your thoughts so that you're going to reach that point where you can start repacking them sooner. And so that last part of that bell curve where you start packing your thoughts up, having simple execution and then create that advanced autopilot, that's very time consuming. And that generally requires you just going through road experience, kind of going through, it just takes time. It just takes time. But you also have to have spent the time to reach that point where you begin that process in the first place. And so when you have that on lock, you can then devote more of your mental stack toward thinking through problems, addressing problems, evaluating them, et cetera, et cetera. Likewise, it is a lot easier if you already have a game plan. If you have essentially mentally played the game through in advance, like hypothetically, that is the highest level of game planning you can have, is to know what your opponents are going to do before they do things in advance, kind of script out the match in advance, and then know what you're going to practice in advance. And even if your execution is weak, if you go in there, if your planning is intermediate, then your missed execution is actually going to throw off your game plan, because your play is going to turn out differently than you had scripted it, independently of what your opponent's going for. And so you have to either be able to plan around your own lack of execution, which is something you can do. Just recognize this is my percentage chance of executing this here. If I miss execute, this is usually what the follow-up situation is, and then flowchart around that. And another way you can go around that is, if you are so thoroughly planned, then you can actually start packing down your game plans so that they become reflex. And it's kind of like an extension of execution. When the decisions themselves are reflexive, you can actually start devoting part of your mental stack toward execution. And so you can actually augment your own ability to play the game while you're playing in bracket, if you have packed down your plans so far and so concretely that they're reflexive. Now, I will say, I don't think I've ever seen a player that actually does this. I don't recommend it, because usually when we make game plans, we are making game plans to the best of our ability, our experience level. And so if you are not like as far up as it gets on the game planning, then if you run into someone who is even as effective as you, or nearly as effective as you, then all of a sudden that advantage isn't going to be so great. And more importantly, it means either you're playing against an extremely high level top player, or neither of your game plans are probably actually that good to begin with, which is what's most commonly the case. Is people feel confident that they understand because they are too ignorant of their own lack of understanding. And so they don't know that there's limitations to their game plan because they're not planning around their own incompetence, which is a normal human thing.
Yeah,
but
you don't know.
Yeah. Whereas execution, you just say, listen, I'm going to do my best. I'm just going to throw as many darts as the board as I can. Whatever sticks, it sticks. Even if you don't get all your darts, you're still getting something on the board, probably. If your game plan doesn't get all the darts on the board, the whole game plan can actually fall to pieces, because it's going to just matter what parts of your game plan lines up versus your opponent's game plan. And so the point here, in summary, is that these are not exclusive of each other. Having one benefits the other. And Charles, you mentioned autopiloting. Like, what is your perspective on autopiloting for mental game?
For the mental game, I think it's just very common. I mean, so before I get into mental game, I actually want to go off of what you were talking about, Tony. Like execution and game plan, they kind of go hand in hand, or they definitely go hand in hand, and they overlap with each other. So I like to think of it as like, okay, once you up a level of execution, you can now make a new game plan. Now that you have this new game plan, you're not going to unlock this other stack of a game plan unless you unlock the next level of execution. And then you can unlock the next level of game plan, because so I'm a Fox player, so I'm going to use Fox here as an example. Am I going to look at Light and take some of his tricks and stuff like that he's doing, like sour dash attack into against normal getup, so reacting to normal getup at the start of it, and as soon as I can react to normal getup, I go for the dash attack. It lines up for a sour dash attack, which I can then link into back here, right? So that is something that is a two-piece, perfect, all this other stuff. That's pretty easy to just yoink and try out and try to execute, right? But if I can't execute that, my ledge trapping from ledge roll is now extremely weaker, right? Because if I do that to my opponent and I'm standing by, and this is why Fox is so strong, specifically at standing at ledge roll, is he can kill you if you normal get up on reaction from ledge roll. Not a lot of characters can do that because he can specifically line up just because of how his dash attack works, right? So Fox is a character that can sit back by roll, or it can spam nair or shield by ledge, and it's like very effective. But it's only very effective if you can do specific things, right? So I can't unlock that game plan of, okay, I can ledge trap by roll at kill percent, and like if they roll in, I smash attack them because I'm already at roll. But if they normal get up, I do dash attack and I kill them. If they get up attack, I can also just whiff punish with smash attack, right? Or if they jump, then I up air. So that is a game plan for ledge trapping with Fox. Can I do this if I don't know how to know how to react to normal get up, get the sour dash attack, not dash, but actually just turn around, but I turn around, but I don't dash or walk. I just turn around, and the frame I turn around, I have to like jump and follow the drift and connect the back air, right? So that game plan gets unlocked with certain layers of execution. If I cannot nair, and now I'll bring it even lower, okay? If I cannot connect nair into up smash as Fox, my opponent now does not have to give a fuck if I hit him with sour nair, right? And that's, again, now this is like, I'm getting way down to the base level, but if I can't do that, I can't use the strategy, which is the baseline strategy of Fox, playing a vertical game with falling aerials. Because if I cannot connect nair into up smash, and I cannot connect nair into up smash, I can't even, I almost want to say, play Fox at a base level. That's how important those confirms are, because that's what makes the character so strong, is that he's the fastest faller in the game. He has all these threatening aerials. He has a multi-hit mix-up. He has a regular hit mix-up, right, that lead into up smash, right? Now I can take it to intermediate level. This is about where I'm at in terms of gameplay. If I get a tech chase, now say sour nair, now tech chases instead of linking into up smash, right? So I'm not light, and I'm not like a top level Fox. So I can't hit if I'm like, even if I'm on point, I can't get a tech chase and just react to every single option. When Light's on point, he can utilize that strategy where it's like, oh, well, nair into up smash doesn't really true combo here, but it puts it to a tech chase. And if Light is on point, tech chase equals death because he just reacts, and then he gets the up smash. I don't play the game enough to do that. So what do I do so I cannot use that game plan, right? I have not unlocked that level of execution. So I either grind the game more to unlock that level of execution, to unlock that game plan, or I can take a shortcut or do something different, right? So the intermediate level is, I get a tech chase. It's a 50-50 because I can run up to the spot where they're going to tech, press forward smash, and I'll cover 3 options out of the 4. And then the one option I don't cover is tech roll in, right? So and then you even go further, right? So it's like, okay, so now I'm playing a 50-50 game where I get a tech chase, and then I either go forward and I up smash, or I land and I turn around. If they roll in, I up smash. If they don't, I corner pressure and try to get it back here, right? So that was, I'm trying to like get the viewers to understand how the stacking occurs of like execution, another layer of game plan, execution, another layer of game plan, right? Same thing with Tweak, with Diddy, right? If Tweak didn't know how to do like the triple banana up smash, he wouldn't have beaten Spargo there, and he couldn't have used that banana toss on the platform to win the game. So that becomes a part of his game plan once he unlocks the execution. And I know all of you guys have said that they kind of go hand in hand. And even though like the Buzz and Tweak might be more favorable on the game plan part, they still have a very top level of execution to be able to unlock these said game plans. So I just kind of wanted to reiterate on that, and like tell the viewers that, just because you like, if I watch Light and I'm like, oh dang, holy shit, I'll just react to every tech chase to get an up smash. Golly, wow, this character's broken. There's different levels, right?
That's just not how it works.
Understanding
your level of execution. Oh yes, definitely. But understanding your level of execution and making game plans around your level of execution, which should then motivate you to want to unlock other layers of other higher levels of game plan, so you'll push your execution to go ahead and complement that and keep stacking up and up.
And
Go ahead.
I just wanted to elaborate on that. That goes both ways too. So, light is actually one of the most, I'd say, I guess self-aware is the closest phrasing I can think of for this,
Pros aware.
on execution and game plan. And he actually can scale down as well. So if Light's not playing well, or if he thinks he's playing a little sluggish, and anytime I'm like helping somebody prepare for Light, always got to check the day. Always got to check the day, what his like reaction time's looking like, what his temperature. Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes if he isn't going to be dropping things like that, he knows. And he actually has like a downgraded version. So he will look for tech chases, and if he thinks he doesn't get tech chases, he just waits and will actually just treat it like an entirely different situation. And so he'll start gathering information, and he'll feint to wait and just turn it into a read, and he'll still save it up for later, even though no matter what, he's always winning. His advantages are still advantages, even if they're not as concrete as they usually are when he gets them. Like he's not a player that if part of him is not working well, he just breaks to pieces. He has a backup. He's got the generator with gas inside in the back.
Yeah, he's got the plan B, plan C, plan D, and no, absolutely. And I think that's one of the strongest things you could do as a player, right? Be self-aware, right? Both for your general growth, but also in those kind of moments, because like we've been all discussing, right? We all agree that every game plan has a execution requirement, right? And that's just how it goes, right? Short and simple. But also you need to be able to recognize where you're at if you can understand where your execution is at, because it's fluid, right? You're not going to always be performing the best, right? Sometimes you can only do basic, man. To use piano references, sometimes you can do the basic, do a little for Elise, right? Some days you're playing godlike and you can do Stravinsky, bro, and you can just do whatever you want. She'll find that you don't even care, right? I can do it all, right? And that but you have to recognize where you are, right? And that's also another thing, right? I think especially when you get to intermediate and mid level, there's a lot of people who are at that level who aren't aware, right? And the worry too sometimes I have with some of these players is people need to understand there's a difference between your, I guess I would say, like your max execution, right? And your sustainable execution, right? Your general execution, as it were. Because what will happen sometimes with players is that they're like, oh, hey, I was able to hit this insane combo that's like super hard to do. So now now I can implement that into my game plan, and I can go for this thing, which I only hit 1 times out of 30. And then I'm, to go back to the light, it would be like if light was like, yeah, man, I can do this. And he's like moving like molasses and he's still trying to react. That would be stupid, right? Like that would be stupid to do. But a lot of people get into that point, and there's many reasons for it. A lot of times, it's just hubris. It's very natural. It's a human thing. You just think you can always play at this peak or whatever, right? We tend to not like to look at our dips, right? We tend to just assume everything is the peak. And so it's like, cool, I can do this now. So that's in my book and that's in my bank and I can do it whenever I want. No, you can't. Right. So being able to identify that as a player is very, very important. Right. And overall, and where your actual execution lands at that point in time, and also kind of where your general execution tends to be. So, okay, pretty much 99 times out of 100, I can do these assortment of things. All right. Then there's a couple things that are kind of in a higher spot that I have to really look for and pay attention to and be like, oh, I'm not hitting that. Okay. I might be on an off day today. So I need to, change my game plan accordingly. Right. And there's still ways to find out things for that. Like you're saying, Tony, to his point, great point where it's utilizing feints, trying to get information. Now I'm getting a read here. I've seen you do this roll 3 times here away from me. So now I'm going to chase that. I'm going to do something to kind of bait that out of you. If I get that out of you, then I can get that W, right? But understanding, because those reactions aren't on point. But that's something that is very, very big when you're trying to go to the next level, right? And ultimately when you look at the meta and you're trying to look at, or not the meta rather, but kind of like the end game, right, as it were, you always want to see the max execution and this is a peak thing, right? But it takes time, right? And you got to put the effort in, right? You got to build a appropriate process for you to learn that stuff. Then once you learn it, how do you implement it in real time, in real matches, right? And slowly get to accustomed to the point where it's like, okay, now I can consider this part of my repertoire, and now I can actually apply this to my game plan, right? And that's the right way to go about it, versus just assuming I'm going to do this 2-3 times. Oh, I can do this is really easy. And then now I can go off the bat. Next thing you know, you just completely whiff and then you just look like a fool, right? And then that's how you get those losses, right? So I think those things are always important, right? To be able to like just know your general execution, right? And then also be able to identify, the peaks and troughs, as it were, and have a game plan that specifically can account for those things so you can still be successful, right? That does because you don't have to just completely take something away because you can't do it there. What part of it can you do? Is there some reward that you can get from this? Right? Is there some kind of information? That information could be the reward. Maybe it's not the extended damage or whatever, but maybe it gives you some kind of information. Then it still is, it's still something that would behoove you to still implement into your overall game plan. So I think it's really important to look at those things.
For sure. And I think something that I think is important is to communicate these ideas with others as well. I think about what others think. And so the way I like to discuss this is I think about like lower end and upper end, right? Like there's your lower end, which is you at your worst, and your upper end, which is you at your best. And so for most people, what I always like focus on is like, okay, how do we raise your lower end? Because I think the issue for most players is not that they are like really good some of the times and really like, it's not about their peak. The issue is never the peak. The issue is almost always the lower end. How low does your lower end go? And that's because, like you said, Bam, most people, they don't like, the lower end is not sexy. Like looking at your worst days, that's not a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
And so you look at your best days and you're like, hey, actually I'm pretty good. But it's a very incomplete view.
Yeah.
And so what I think is important is, when working on a lower end, is to always go through essentially 3 steps, right? Your first step is always to kind of like look at your own play. Maybe, like Tony said, it's a good moment to get coaching in these phases where you're essentially looking for what you don't see, right? So in other words, you're looking for the decisions that you're not making. And so that is a very hard thing to find, which is why guidance is a good thing. But what you're essentially looking for is you're looking for new ideas. And then the second phase that you go into is essentially like field testing. Like you have your new idea and you're going to try to figure out, like, does this idea hold up in practice, right?
Yep.
Is this something that's sustainable? And then finally, once you're at a point where you're satisfied with your theory, that's when you can start implementing it. And so an issue that I see with a lot of my students is that they kind of go straight to the implementation step. They're like, okay, I'm just going to play, and become really good by just throwing hours at this game. And so it's good to throw hours at the game, but if you're not actively integrating something into your play, the hours are extremely inefficient. And so the part of the game that's like, again, it's not sexy, it's not fun, but it's the most important part, is where you're essentially just sitting down, looking at your VODs. What are some new ideas? Look at other players, right? Look at the top of the meta. Look at Spargo, Sonics, Aquila, Mia. What are they doing that I am not doing? And then also from there, like when you have a new idea, don't just go straight into like grinding your new idea out, but try to play around with it first. Maybe write down why you think your idea is good, and then try to see if that holds up in practice. Oh, I think I should let's rep at roll distance with Fox because I can react to this, and like these are my punishes, blah, blah, blah. And then you go into practice and then you realize someone can just do like drop down, double jump, aerial and ruin your entire ledge trap. And like turns out that at top level, that's like the most important option. Oh shit, now I need to find out a different strategy that keeps this in mind. And now that's not entirely true for Fox because like, roll distance ledge trap beats that too because that check is busted. But you see what I mean, right? Like I think there's always 3 phases. There's ideas, iteration, and integration.
Yeah.
And so figuring that out is very important. And that's where we kind of go back to, I guess, the dichotomy between execution and plan. Because I think in a lot of ways, execution kind of comes second to having a proper plan. Because there is, of course, the fact, I totally agree with the point that we've been making so far, which is that execution gives you tools and the tools that you have determine the plan that you execute. Entirely true. But I think in terms of practice, you don't know what to practice until you have an idea. And so while execution gives you the tools to determine your game plan, I think a lot of the time, game plan gives you an idea of what type of tools you need. And so stumbling upon something by accident and then being like, oh, that's something that's really good, I should execute that more often, I think is a relative rarity. And more than anything, unreliable, right? Even if it's not rare, you cannot rely on stumbling upon something that you can execute repeatedly to win a game. But you
That's
can.
impossible, Ramsey. What are you talking about? I'm a genius. Things just come to me. All right. I just think it and it becomes reality. That's all I want.
Not everyone has as many, has a bank account like you after your tournament winnings.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
yeah. Damn, I should have thought about that.
We cannot all get to that level. But the point is, it's not consistent that you're going to get new ideas by looking for new ideas either. But from my personal experience, there's a way higher success rate when you start reflecting on your plan and trying to get hints on what to learn in terms of execution from developing a better plan than vice versa. And vice versa is definitely possible. And I mean, I think a lot of players who kind of got to the top level by being what Tony described, a prodigy, right, have done exactly that. They've made simple assumptions. They've relied on their intuition. They have essentially figured things out by executing and kind of like quote unquote naturally coming to the right options that they should learn to execute better and better. But again, this is not a consistent process. And I think that is, if you're looking to reach a high level and you're looking to guarantee it as much as possible, I really do recommend starting off with kind of like having some sort of plan. And your plan doesn't have to be complex. And like Tony said, you don't need to do like a you don't have to do a complex formula to press the A button. But when you're reviewing your own games and you ask yourself, why did I press the A button? You should at least know the reason why you pressed A. And if that's like, if you actually know the reason, that's going to be complex. It's just that in the moment, it needs to be simplified to the degree that it is not complex in the moment. But during review, the more depth you have on your decision making, the more axes you have, the more dimensions you have through which you can review your decision making, which also means that you have more elements of your play that you can improve in the long term.
Yeah.
And so I think, the more levers you have to pull, the more chances of success you have, and the more chances of success you have, the more you're set up for success in general. So yeah, those are my thoughts on what we discussed so far. I'd like to hear what you guys have to think.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say real quick, like, yeah, I agree with you. Where it's like, obviously, before like execution, right? You have to have an idea, right? So you're not just a drone, just practice arbitrary things, right? You have to do it with intention, right? Just like practice has to be done with intention. Period. Right? It's like sitting down and the classic saying of like, oh man, if a whirlwind just goes through and there's a hole, through like some kind of like hanger, right? Is it just going to magically build a like 747 with all the pieces? Probably not, right? Like you have to have intention in when you're building this thing, right? And I mean, even for those players, right, that we see as like prodigies, I think a lot of them operate in that way, right? I think of people like Void and Larry, and even talking with them like a lot of times, like we kind of like look at like just like kind of like the type of players those two tend to be, right? They a lot of times they have certain ideas and concepts in their head, and they're shadow boxing this stuff out all day every day, right? Like even when I look back in the day when I used to just like practice with Larry a lot of the hypotheticals and stuff we're going through all the time, right? So it's like it's not them just kind of magically like even like through that time period of just playing and like all of a sudden like, oh yeah, now I just like thought it's whatever, right? But it's just like they're actually playing these 100,000 matches of hypotheticals in their head, and then they see like, oh wait, how do I defeat this option, right? Or now that I'm doing this and this is working here, now there's a new problem to solve because now they're leaning into the secondary option because this is beating out the first initial thing we're doing, right? So where's my counter strategy there, right? And then kind of build from there, right? So I think that it's doing that kind of level of like process is not necessarily for everyone. I think some people more so need to like go through the videos themselves right? Watch people, sit down, take this, go through, right? But I think there are certain people that can kind of sit down and kind of see the the pieces, right? And kind of do the who is it? Is it Michelangelo they always talk about? They'll be walking around. Am I tripping? Who is it?
I don't know her.
I don't remember who the creator, but like they would, gosh, this is crazy. I can't remember. Anyways, but like they would just essentially like they look around before they're going to build out like a when they were doing any kind of statue or any piece, they would take time to reflect before they would like go ahead and build this thing out, right? And they'd just be staring at this thing for like the mold of clay, right? The proverbial clay for days on end, weeks on end, but they're doing all that stuff in their head, right? So
Right.
it's the same process. It's just like
Different canvas.
yeah, absolutely. Some people are able to do it on the mental canvas. Some people
Mhm.
need to get out a physical canvas and freaking pick up a paintbrush and start painting, right? And start looking at other people's work, right? We all get there in the different ways. It's okay. You don't have to be that person who can just do it in your head, right? But you also, I think it's important to identify what kind of person you are there and leverage that,
Yep.
right, to your benefit and to your growth. And I think that is really important. So
People who just sit down and mash matches, or like people who go to the gym and just pick up any random weight and start trying to do things. Like that's not gonna work for you, little bro. You need to pick up something heavy and actually put effort into it. If you're not challenging yourself and progressing your play to do harder things, whether that's mental game or execution, you're not gonna go anywhere. That's just how that works. And speaking of, I think that the one of the more niche examples of mental game is actually Larry Lurr, since I would say that the particular form of intelligence that he has, like just being such a smart player, is enough that when you think of the smartest players in the world, they probably would lose to Larry Lurr or just struggle a lot because he's smarter than everybody else. But the way to beat him consistently is if you just execution test him a lot. It's over.
not my boy Larry, dude. Don't expose my boy Larry like that, man.
Yeah, rip to a legend. So his poor old bones just aren't ready for all that stress. So and then on the flip side, you have T, who has the arguably smartest constructed autopilot. Speaking of autopilot, and then he's also very smart at recognizing when people know the immediate counter to that autopilot and then countering that with his second layer. And so that is enough to beat pretty much everyone on the planet for the most part. And he's so smart up to that point. And then if you can counter him from there, he's dead in the water. He doesn't have the third layer. Like if he came over to the US and stopped just annihilating us long enough to actually learn the way we play Smash and picked up the third layer of play, I think he would actually probably be the best player on the planet right now. Like just within months of learning that. Like he's so strong at those first two layers. But that's the point, is that there's different ways that intelligence and good planning and mental will stack. And part of what's so good about T is that he's fairly mentally resilient, which is an entirely different form of mental game. So it is important for your execution that you actually sit down and execute it, which is a very simple thing to say. If you have not been in a tournament setting, then you might not understand the nuance behind that sentence, but anyone who has been in an intense bracket match will know that. But when I sat down, my buttons didn't come out and all the things that I practiced just didn't work. Mm-hmm. Mental game is where this comes into the play. And I think that when you see the rhetoric that mental game is the most important, or I've even seen it said that all of Ultimate is mental game, that it's generally this concept that if you don't have mental game, if you don't have the mental resilience to sit down and put yourself in the state of mind that you need to actually do the rest of the game, then you showed up for nothing. And so the idea here is that you should be able to kind of place yourself outside of that stress so that you can still execute it, or you should be able to play under that stress and still execute it just like you would in your living room at home. And there are people who will tell you they play better under stress, that they play more focused under stress. I'm willing to bet that they generally still play better in their living room at home, but the concept that they're generally referring to is that people tend to feel differently under stress and respond differently to it. And so they feel more focused, they feel more comfort. And when that comfortable feeling of the stress comes in, then it usually balances it out. And so they're less likely to feel symptoms of stress, like things like nervousness and such. I think that this comes down to mostly physical conditioning, mental conditioning. These are all different ways of playing the game that don't involve touching the controller. We won't go into that too much, but the idea here is that mental game presents itself in different ways. Like Charles, you've been a coach for several years. What would you say that you would do to help your players prepare for their mental game?
I think for me, the big thing about mental game, especially if we're viewing it in context, like against execution, if we're, I mean, the title of this video is like execution versus mentality. I think mentality is more important than execution because execution can affect your mentality. It can give you confidence. But I think it's way stronger the other way around, where mentality can demolish your execution. I've seen players get so like their mentality is so like down in the dumps, or they're so nervous or anything like that. Like mentality is a very general word, so I'm gonna tie it with things like nerves or anxiety and stuff like that, right? Like these overwhelming emotions that are coming through. I've seen players that are like the best in the world just run off the stage, directional air dodge, and just literally take their own stock. So it's like, wow. I mean, you couldn't even play neutral, right? You couldn't do what you want. Not only that, you took away your most precious resource in Smash, which is your own stock, right? So, and players lose games because of it. They lose sets because of it. So, I think the mental game is more important than execution for sure. And I think that is the reason why, because they both affect each other and they both have crossovers. But it can be so devastating when your mental affects your execution. And I think your execution affecting your mental, it's like you get a little small confidence boost. You're like, oh dang, I'm nice with it. Like I hit that 3-piece or 4-piece or whatever, right? And then, but the reason why that's the case is because I mean your mentality, you're a human, right? It's the base to everything. And to help someone, like my biggest advice to someone that can, in my opinion, is like the easiest like shortcut way of saying it, is most people's mentality starts to spiral when you are not in the present. Because if you are, and for me, like I'm a huge fan of meditation, so I mean being in the present is what meditation's all about. So when you're in the present, you don't have time to be salty about something that didn't happen or is happening right now. So I would say 9 times out of 10, most players, their mentality starts to spiral because they are not in the present. They're thinking why they're in losers bracket. They're thinking of a mistake they made, it's an execution mistake, right? So that's another thing where like execution can start the snowball of your mentality, because you're like, man, I always hit that nair up smash, but I fucking missed it. Like, but that happened 2 stocks ago, or that happened in the last game. That happened in winners bracket 3 sets ago. Like, why the fuck are you thinking about that right now? Like, that has already happened, and no matter what you do right now, unless you got superpowers, you can't change that shit. It's done. It's did. Sign. Done. That moment happened, and you can't do anything to change that right now. So you should focus on the now. You should focus on your match right now. You should focus on the situation right now. And the only time you want to even think back on past interactions, if you want to do that, is the information you gathered on your opponent, right? So that would be the only time you would try to break away from the present, because it's going to help you in the future, or like pretty much in the future, like maybe a couple next interactions or whatever. It's like, okay, maybe they're going to roll from ledge next. But I think to dial it in, if you're getting stressed out, a couple of deep breaths and you just focus on the actual breathing, you focus on what's happening now. That is my like 1 cent. Obviously mentality goes really, really deep. And the next episode we're going to talk about is preparing mentality, preparing execution, like just tournament prep in general. So I can go more into detail about that. But just like a quick thing to just that will solve most mentality issues, in my opinion, is focusing on the present. And you also have to realize that you play more outside of tournament than in tournament. So you are just generally going to be less experienced in these scenarios, right? So, I mean, even going back to, oh, hey, my execution's not too well. Well, why is your execution not too well? Is it because you're nervous? Is it because your hands are shaking? Is it because you're dripping in sweat because the venue's super hot? Is it because of these outside things that aren't in the game, right? But you could, is it because the crowd behind you, all these people yelling? Like usually there's not people yelling when you play your friendly matches, right? And that's why I said focusing on the now. If you can just try your best, and obviously it's not just like, oh yeah, just drown everything out and focus on the game. Obviously, that's easier said than done, and it comes with experience. But if you're trying to do that, if you're actively trying to do that, you can see what happens when you try to do that and what affects you from not doing it, and then you can try to work on it later, right? So as long as there's the effort of trying to stay in the present, you can figure out what helps you stay in the present, what doesn't help you stay in the present, right? And you have to figure out all of this through trial and error. So it's not like there's a book on it because every person's different, right? So it's not like, all right, Tony, here's your individually printed book of all the things that make you stay in the present, all the things that don't make you stay in the present. Go ahead, give that a read, whip it up the next time, and you're good to go. It's all trial and error.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I wish someone could give me a book that had my name on it and just had everything there, right? Because it's just, I mean, that's almost a thing throughout life that you're going to have to do, not just in Smash. So, yeah, I mean that, and the thing is too about tracking your execution and stuff, also tracking your mentality. This is something that Void helped me a lot with. Is like when you are playing nervous, right? Say like your mentality's all fucked up, and that usually doesn't happen to you, or like you only get nervous in these very specific scenarios. Instead of getting pissed and like frustrated about it, you should view it as an opportunity. Oh wow, I'm only like, say I travel out to a major twice a year and I get nervous every single time I go to a major, but only when I go to a major, not my locals, right? So these 2 times a year you get samples, right? You get samples of what do I do when I'm nervous? So like for me personally, I mean I've like observed myself when I play nervous. I know I have nervous tics. When I'm nervous, I go to the corner, I run away from my opponent because I don't want to commit to anything, and I jump. I like go to the corner, and then eventually when my opponent comes in, I feel very comfortable in the air naturally because I'm boxed. So I'll jump in a lot of scramble scenarios, and I'll jump in a lot of like corner scenarios. I'll go for a full hop. Very common thing to do. But if you can start tracking your own nervous habits and your nervous autopilot, that's going to help you a lot. So then, when I'm nervous, there's one thing I tell myself. I tell myself, stay grounded. Because if I'm nervous and I fucking lose again because I jump, what did I learn? I learned absolutely fucking nothing. I just learned and I just solidified the fact that I always jump in scrambles and I always jump when I'm nervous in these types of scenarios, right? But if I stay grounded and say I still lose, right? Say I still lose, I stay grounded, I did these grounded options. It's like, well, what grounded option worked? What grounded option didn't? Why did I do this grounded option? You can start deep diving more so into that. And you're really just trying to figure yourself out and that's why autopilot is so important, right? So when you are nervous, that's when your autopilot takes over. And instead of trying to, I mean, I guess correct your autopilot, you want to make sure because your autopilot's your floor, right? So you just want to raise your floor, like Ramses was saying, as high as possible. So when you are nervous, you have this autopilot. But if there's specific holes in that autopilot, what I'm saying is like, yes, raise the floor. But if you know you have specific holes, you just tell yourself, oh, hey, like as long as I don't do X and Y, like I don't even care if I lose because I'll get new information, right? So kind of going in with that mentality and just staying in the now, I think for me personally, the thing that would really tilt me is like I hit an air, I don't get the up smash, and then I'm playing out the rest of the neutral, and in my brain I would always tell this to myself. I'll just be like, I already fucking won. Like I already won the game, but I'm still fucking here because I suck. So automatically I'm like my brain, I'm telling myself that I already win. I deserve X. When I don't, I don't deserve it because I didn't fucking hit the up smash. I didn't hit the confirm. So, but I'm telling myself I deserve something, and then the next course of action is I'm downplaying myself. So not only am I not thinking about the present, I'm thinking about the past, right? Now I'm also putting myself down, which is lowering my confidence, and I'm telling myself I deserve something that I don't. So then when I lose, I feel cheated and angry, and say that was game one. Now I feel cheated, angry, and I also feel less confident because I'm downplaying myself for the rest of the set. Just because I missed one confirm in game one. And then I'm going to think about that whole, like for the rest of the set, I'm thinking about that one scenario or that first game. Fuck, I should be up 2-1, but it's fucking whatever. It's 2-1 in their favor, or I'm down 1-2 or whatever, right? So through my personal experiences, that's, and also coaching other people, I think that's the biggest things I can talk about, or my biggest talking points about mentality in general. What are your thoughts, Bam?
For sure. Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
If you don't mind, Bam. All right. So I think something I want to clarify before we discuss further is when we talk about mental game, I think we're talking about two aspects of it, right? Like part of it that we discussed is your preparation, your game plan, how you think about the game. But part of your mental game is also how do you compose yourself in the middle of a game?
So emotions versus strategy kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, kind of. And so that's something that if you're listening to this podcast and you're confused about the topics, it's both of it is mental game. But one of it is essentially like Charles said, your strategy, and the other part of it is essentially what do you do in the middle of a game. And so in terms of in the middle of the game, something that I think is important to keep in mind is if you are not in present, so you're essentially mentally in the past or you're mentally in the future, that is usually a self-preservation action by your mind, right? It's because think about it this way. If your number one focus is winning, then what is your brain doing? It is constantly trying to solve the problem of winning. And so if what you're thinking about is not winning, then there's something else that is more important to you than winning, which is fine, but it's something you have to recognize if you want to solve it. So for example, in Charles's case, and I don't mean to assign any emotion or experience to Charles, but if someone came to me and they said the same thing to me, I would be like, okay, so what about that lost interaction is so important to you? And then a lot of students have the same thing as what Charles said, and they're like, well, I feel cheated. And so to them, that experience of feeling cheated, or the unfairness, I guess, of things not going the way that you want them to go, is essentially more important than winning in that moment. And so if outside of that moment to you it's more important to win, then that is something you'll have to essentially meditate on, right? Think about, do some self-reflection and figure out why it's so important for you to not feel cheated. And so there's a lot of different things that can lead to thinking about the past or future. For example, very straightforward, your ego, right? I lost, I shouldn't have lost. I feel like I'm better. And so why is it so important for you to feel like you're better, right? Why is that outcome of winning or losing more important to you than the process of playing the game, of winning, of problem solving, et cetera, et cetera? And so something that I want to just add to Charles' story is that if you do find yourself not being able to focus on the present, there's oftentimes that's just a direct result of essentially what your brain prioritizes, right? You think about what is important to you. And so if you're not thinking about winning, there's something else that's more important. And so I really urge you to reflect on that, just meditate on that, think about that, and be honest with yourself more than anything. I personally struggled with this a very long time. And I actually talked with Tony about this as well. About how there are elements of the game that in the moment are important to me, and so why? And a lot of the time it comes down to ego preservation, right? Getting mad at the game and then losing, that allows you to say afterwards, oh well, I mean, I lost, but I didn't play my best, right? I was mad about the game. And so the act of being mad gives you an excuse in the future. And it's not a deliberate choice. It's not like you're sitting there I'm gonna get mad here so that in the future I can get an excuse. No, it's it's ego, right? It's a self-preservation action that is entirely subconscious. But extremely frequent because losing while trying your hardest fucking sucks. It really does suck. If you try your hardest and you come up short, what does that say about you, right? And so a lot of people, they say it means I'm not good enough. It means that all the effort I put in didn't lead to anything. It means that what everyone said about me is true, right? And so these are all things that people value. They value what other people think about them. They value the effort they put in. They value what you think about yourself, right? Because if you come up short, like a lot of people, like they just get down on themselves. They're like, I tried really hard and I'm not good. I came up short. I'm not good enough. I suck, right? So like, if you get an excuse like I was mad, so I didn't play my best, it's no longer you. It's not your fault. You just didn't play your best. And so being honest with yourself and saying like, hey, actually, I really care about, I don't know, what others think about me, or I think I care about like how I look at myself, stuff like that. That is the first step to having the better in-game mentality. And so I just wanted to add that. More than anything, I just wanted to add the clarification because I think it can get a little bit confusing when we're talking about like mental game and it has like two different definitions. But just to keep it clear, there's like the in-game part, like your emotional, your composure, and then there's the strategy, the planning, the improvement part that's mostly out of game. So just my 2 cents. I'll just pass it back into the group since Bam was asked by Charles. Bam, what are your thoughts?
Nah, man, I got nothing to say to you, dude.
Nothing to say to me.
Nothing to say to you.
Okay.
I want to hear
say it to
Tony's
me then,
thoughts,
Bam.
dude.
Yeah, say it, Tony.
Talk to me, Tony. Tell me how you really feel.
All right, so I'm actually super passionate about this topic just because I would say that this is one of the most recurring coaching situations that I personally have come up with. Is
it's not a character
won the
crisis?
game.
Come on,
Yeah.
man. Character crisis is like,
Oh, they're all up there. Oh, so I won this
think-
game, but I lost,
Yeah.
and I'm upset about it, and I don't want to be upset. So generally, my perception of that is that the idea is your expectation is not meeting the reality. Like these two things, like that is something we can call a fact. Like your expectations, I won the game, is not meeting up with the reality. My opponent has the victory screen. And so generally what that comes down to is entitlement. So generally what we feel there is I caused X, but I received Y. And therefore it should have been X, but it's not X. So when we allow entitlement to take over, it supersedes our ability to think through the situation. We're now in our feelings. And so, especially if this is early on into a set, that means that we're now stuck into feeling mode. And so that's going to affect how we process further information going in. Because let's say you play an RPS situation with your opponent, one of you is going to lose the stock there, you lose the stock, you're already in your emotions. So you're now set to process this, not of, okay, so what do I need to cause now to get what I actually want from this set? You are now in, well, how do I feel about that? Losing the next RPS. I don't like it. A whole lot of things I don't like are happening in this set right now, and I don't like this set, and I want to go home now. So how are you going to be able to turn that around and set that so that you, whichever player you are then setting it up so that the result of the match is going to occur to match what you want the expectations to meet? And so I think that what is important to keep in mind here is that, of course, there's plenty of philosophies on life and how we get what we want, or whether we should in the first place. But my personal philosophy is generally no one deserves anything. It's simply a matter of there is a cause and there is an effect. If you don't like the effects of what is happening in reality, then you should consider what causes can I create to bring about the reality I want to exist. And so you need to actually set yourself back and think about, well, I know that Nair to up smash, if it doesn't work, makes this matchup look completely different. And so if you are accepting the reality, Nair did not combo into up smash, therefore that maybe I wasn't supposed to win that game because that's not what the matchup would have looked like if Fox does not actually have Nair to up smash is true. Does he theoretically? Yes. Do you? Some percentage of the time. And so you need to understand, and we've discussed this many times, usually as dice rolling or percentages, and just understanding Smash is not fully deterministic. There is chances. There's so many variables that go into this. Even though I just said it's about cause and effect, at the end of the day, even if you think you did everything correct, there is so many variables and life is so complicated. Even when you distill it down to a video game, things are so complicated that we can't always predict how things are going to progress. We can just be likely to understand what the outcomes are going to be. And as we improve competence, like even if you were to take every single player here, every single commentator analyst who's in this call, and we were all to have a hive mind analysis where we try to predict the match result of every tournament, we're going to be wrong a very frequent amount of the time. Are we going to be right more often than we're wrong? Probably. But we're not always going to be right. And so the idea there is that it's just too complex. And so you need to think about the various possibilities of the person you're about to become in the near future. So you look at what you are at the present, like Charles said. You think about the different people you're about to become. There's, depending on how you act, whether you get out of the chair, whether you move left or right on the controller, these are all different possible selves you could create. And so which one of these selves is most likely to lead to the reality you want there to be? Is it the person who is stuck on their feelings, or is it the person who is interrupting those feelings, those thoughts of, well, did this deserve to happen or not? It doesn't matter. You're in the present now. What is on the board, and how can you make the game state, the board that is in front of you, what are the steps to lead that into the victory screen that you want to be at the end of the match? You have to look at what tools are available, and then how you can enact those tools, what your opponent is going to work with you to give for there. Because at the end of the day, even though it's a competitive game, when you start getting into advanced game planning and advanced mental game for both strategic and emotional regulation, it's going to come down to viewing your opponent as less of a competitor and more of a cooperator. And because your opponent, even when they do something to block off your path, they're going to give you a new opening. If you view it as your opponent trying to help you reach the match result you want, you need to think about what they are conveying to you, that they are trying to help you reach the tournament result you want. And when you do that and you start looking and focusing your thoughts on the opportunities instead of what already was missed or didn't happen, then that usually allows you to be a bit more rational, a bit more forward thinking, literally in this case, as you then turn your mindset around. And it comes down to being able to center your thoughts, being able to enact the beginning of those thoughts, which is ultimately what usually comes down to techniques like meditation. So as Charles said, that is far and away one of the most common situations that I personally help people with.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead, man.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna add, it's just like, yeah, it is like Tony said, and I think that's something that's important. And I will always say this, like, understand that a lot of these processes are something that are very much important skills in life, period. Understanding these things, right? Understanding, what you can control, what you can't control, what things are going to be complex beyond your understanding, and we have to accept, but we can still chase trying to discover and understand and learn the complexity, to our best of our ability. Like, these are all things that we all got to deal with being human in this world, right? And it's imperative, if you guys don't get anything from this, to like very least understand that part, right? And understand in a way that you can be humble where you need to be, right? Still push yourself and grow and learn, right? And discover and ideate, right? And rinse and repeat and intentionally practice, right? So you can build confidence, appropriate confidence, right? Versus just hubris. That this should have been this way because blah, 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 blah. No, dude, that's just not how stuff works at all, right? And yes, even in a game, right? Like the life is this, like, times like a billion, for the most part, right? So like it's something that we can all learn from, and it is something that is imperative not only to your gameplay and understanding of the entirety of the game, but also life and how you can move forward, right? And it's something that is so like vital. Like, it's one of the biggest things you can learn as a human being to grow. And I would love for everybody who's watching this to continue to grow and be better. I mean, that's why we all do this, and this is why we love what we do, right? We want to grow and learn about the world, and obviously through the lens of Smash, but yeah, like this stuff is transferable, right? That's why that's part of the beauty of it all.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
competition will unveil some of the darkest sides of people, and I think
For sure.
when you put a lot of time into something and you don't get the result you want, that's going to be in a lot of, like, you're going to be put in that situation a lot in life. And I think for me, competing, ever like in Brawl since high school, I was exposed to that process before even being an adult, which I think is a
Yep.
good thing you can learn from. Competition. Probably the biggest thing you can learn. It's like, oh, you put X amount of time and resources into this, and you didn't get what you want. Are you going to flail your arms and scream like a child? Are you going to be sad and mopey for a week and not talk to anybody? Like, what, when you're put in a low spot after you've committed so much time and resources, what is your reaction? Or do you take action to get what you want, like Tony said, right? Are you able to put your emotions on the side and just be like, okay, well, what I did there did not work. What can I change to get what I want? And to get to that point takes a lot of growth. But I think everyone that competes in any type of, fighting game or video game or anything like that, or just competes in general, I think that's the biggest thing you can take away from it. Even if you don't end up being a pro in what you're competing in and stuff like that, I think you can still grow a lot as a person in general. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think
life's a struggle, right? And it's
yeah.
like life's a struggle, and then competitive gaming is that tempered struggle, right? It is that variant of it, right? It's
Yeah.
more controlled, but
More
nonetheless, it's going to be a struggle, right? And
Yeah.
and ultimately, you're playing against humans, right? So, like, other people who have their own dreams and goals and wants and wishes, who are competing against you, right? And so you got to deal with that in tandem with the system, right? So kind of even like going back to kind of what we've all been talking about ultimately in terms of execution, right? Execution is like you want to be able to execute so you can utilize the system to the best of your ability, right? And build from there, right? Because if you're fighting against the system and someone else, your ass probably gonna lose, bro. I'm sorry, hate to be
And
the bearer of bad
yourself.
news. Yeah, and
And
yourself,
yourself.
like, yeah, he
Yeah.
get jammed.
At the end of the
Like,
day,
You got like
you
hella
got everyone,
enemies, bro.
you
You're
got everyone
surrounded.
dumping you, including you, and you're slapping yourself in the face, bro. You're cooked, bro. There's no way.
And the horse
You ain't
rode
winning.
in
I'm
on.
sorry.
And the
You
horse
ain't
you rode
winning.
in on.
You guys know the Vinland Saga quote. You have no enemies.
Yeah.
Your opponents are just representations of your own struggles, dude. That's it.
Yes. Absolutely.
If you cannot beat someone, that says more about you than them. That's all I'm saying.
Facts,
I
man.
think I think there's one saying that I think is also very relevant to this, and that is I don't know if you guys know the Carl Sagan quote. If you want to bake an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. I love that quote. And I think it's the same for like improvements. If you want to truly improve, like if you want to if you want to make a game plan from scratch, you must first invent the meta, right? Like you must understand the entire context of what you're working in to actually like truly like make something and understand something. And so that's like the high point of the bell curve. It's like understanding the meta. And then once you understand it, you can go back to simplifying and baking your little apple pie.
Yeah.
So I think like that's part of also like the mental game is like just understanding like, hey, it's a process and it's a non-linear process. And so sometimes you're figuring out like the fucking the nuclear fission math to understand the universe, and sometimes you're baking a fucking pie. And there are points where it will be smooth and there's points where it will not be smooth. And I think what you should value and what should keep you going is progress. And progress, again, doesn't have to be forward. Sometimes you take a step back and that's actually like the progress you're making. Because again, improvement is not linear. Unlearning things is just as important as learning things, if not more important, because it's harder, right? It's rare that you unlearn something. It's a very exasperating process to unlearn something. And so for anyone struggling with like the process of improvement, with the hubris, with the ego, I think taking a step back and kind of like, again, like recentering, like, what do I want? What do I want to get out of it? But also understanding where am I in the process and what is the process actually, right? Like understanding the universe before you bake a cake. And so when you're at that point, you can contextualize what's happening to you, and that contextualization will give you control and understanding, and that control and understanding will then motivate you to keep going, at least hopefully.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. This was a great episode. We deep dived into a lot of things, execution versus mentality. Next episode, we are planning to do tournament prep, which will obviously include all of these things, but more on the preparation side. So until the next episode, we'll be seeing you guys later. Class dismissed.